Urban sprawl and population carrying capacity. How demand for land and housing in Melbourne's property market is affected, by Paris Michelotta and Thomas Bullen.
So firstly, we'll be looking at definitions of the key concepts that make up our topic area. So the first definition is urban sprawl, and that is the spreading of urban developments such as houses and shopping centres on undeveloped land near a city. Population. Population is the total number of persons inhabiting a country, city or any district or area. Carrying capacity. A species' average population size in a particular habitat. The species' population size is limited by environmental factors like adequate food, shelter, water and mates. If these needs are not met, the population will decrease until the resource rebounds.
Demand is an economic principle referring to a consumer's desire to purchase goods and services and willingness to pay a price for the specific good or service. Land is any part of the Earth's surface not covered by a body of water, the part of the Earth's surface occupied by continents and islands. Housing, the process of providing places for people to live. Property market, a system for which property is used and traded.
So next we have created a little mind map with 5 key elements that answer the question, what influences the demand for land and housing in Melbourne's property market? So first we have urban sprawl, and this is when people spread into surrounding suburbs rather than the focal point of the city for many reasons, like housing affordability, maximum carrying capacity, population growth, etc. An example of this is Melbourne's northern suburbs like Epping, Wollert and Yarrambat, etc., which are becoming denser due to more housing affordability offered in these suburbs. Next is population growth. The population of Melbourne is growing rapidly. It's estimated to be 5.1 million in 2019. And due to this, people are seeking more housing in all inner, middle and outer ring suburbs of Melbourne as a result of sprawl, thus creating a bigger demand for land and housing. Next is housing affordability. Not all housing is affordable in the desired middle ring suburbs, which causes people to sprawl to outer suburbs where housing is more affordable. Thus, a growing demand for more land, property and housing to satisfy the growing population. Next are amenities. Amenities are what drive the property market and housing prices. Schools, transport, shops and infrastructure, etc. add value to land and property. People want to live close to these things, and thus the demand for housing and land near these amenities must be supplied. And lastly, carrying capacity. Once the carrying capacity of people per property per suburb has reached its limit and there is no more room for people to reside in that particular suburb, people must sprawl to the surrounding outer suburbs that must be fit for people to reside in.
Melbourne is the fastest growing city in Australia. The city's population is projected to grow from 4.6 million to almost 8 million, with Victoria's total set to top 10 million by 2051. Here, the urban sprawl within Melbourne over the past 30 years is shown in the map. The red patches predominantly within Melbourne CBD is the growth shown from 1883 to 1926. The purple highlights the growth from 1927 to 1953 within the ring suburbs. The dark and light yellow shows the sprawl from 1954 to 2000, characterising the outer suburbs. The blue highlights the population sprawl from 2001 to 2015 in the fringe suburbs. Ultimately, this map demonstrated the continued and expansive urban sprawl we are seeing and have seen in Melbourne since its establishment. Our population will continue to grow, and this graphic will continue to spread further and further away from the only large economic hub, the CBD. So, how can this growing population be catered for? This YouTube video we wish to play for you shows Plan Melbourne's Metropolitan Planning Strategy for 2050 and their vision. The key takeaways for the future of Melbourne is emerging employment clusters outside of the CBD, transport gateways through airports and ports, transport connections through freeways and rail, and therefore an economic hub throughout Melbourne in the shape of a triangle. This week's reading was Population Growth and Change, Implications for Australia's Cities and Regions by McGurk and Argent in 2019. So just the key points that we found were that the settlement pattern of Australia has provided an array of social, economic, infrastructural and environmental challenges. Population growth and the ripple effects they create further influence these challenges. The article highlights the current trends for future living. So for Australian cities, these include challenges such as affordable housing, suitable employment, infrastructure services, managing growth, environment constraints, and consolidation. For rural regions, the challenges and process of depopulation, demographic decline, ageing, threats to community, socio-economic viability, growth management, repopulation and consolidation. Interconnected demographic change is a large component also. And finally, there is a great sense of worry throughout the article that our sustainable carrying capacity will be exceeded.
So next, I've pinched a couple figures from this week's reading, which is The Population Growth and Change, Implications for Australia's Cities and Regions by McGurk and Argent. So firstly, figure 2 shows the projected population growth in capital cities of Australia from 2010 to 2056. Melbourne is the second highest line, starting from 4 million in 2010, increasing to almost 7 million in 2055, which is a massive increase. And figure 3 shows the estimated resident population of major cities in 2009. It might be a bit hard to see, but it shows that Melbourne's estimated resident population is 3,995,537 in comparison with the entirety of Australia, being the largest estimated resident population behind Sydney.
So I hope you're all listening. It's time for the quiz. So the 4 questions we will be asking you to answer are: number 1, explain the difference between urban sprawl and carrying capacity. Number 2, respectively, what is Victoria's and Melbourne's projected population by 2050? Number 3, what improvements do Plan Melbourne aim to achieve by 2050? And number 4, according to figure 2 from the reading earlier, what is the projected population growth in Melbourne by 2055? So now for the answers. Question 1. So urban sprawl is the gradual spread of urban developments on undeveloped land, whereas carrying capacity is the number of species which can be supported by the environment. Question 2. Victoria's population will be projected to be 10 million and Melbourne's projected to be 8 million. Question 3. Emerging employment clusters outside of CBD, transport gateways and transport connections, as shown in the video before. And finally, question 4 was 7 million by 2055.
And lastly, to summarise what we have covered, we've covered key definitions of this week's topic, which have been unpacked to be able to gain a basic understanding of what we would further explore in the presentation. We created a mind map as a visual tool to be able to engage with the key factors that influence the demand for land and housing in Melbourne's property market. Come to find that it's based around urban sprawl and population carrying capacity, which is our topic area. We have explored a map of Melbourne's urban growth and where sprawl is headed and why it exists, due to primarily affordable housing options and population growth, which forces our carrying capacity outwards. Key takeaways from this week's reading and helpful diagrams to assist in our learning of population growth, resulting in sprawl and exploring residential population. And lastly, a Q&A activity based on the short YouTube clip shown and the content we have covered in this presentation for the purpose of assisting us in consolidating our learning.
And finally, thanks very much for listening.